Bob's introduction.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So thank you.
All right.
Being here. Yeah.
Good morning. Thanks all for coming. Yeah, like I said, I'm right next door over here at Oregon Fish and Wildlife, and my job is to help manage the shellfish resources of Oregon, crabs and clams. I want to thank you all for coming today. I've seen some familiar faces, and I've been around here for a while. In fact, started as an aquarist back in a long time ago. And so I did my time up front, and I know how many questions you all get from the public. I get them too, but what I'm here to do is to help you be prepared for some of those questions and or answers. If I don't provide it today, know that we're always over there right across the hall, so check in anytime if you have questions or get one that you can't quite answer. So yeah, I'm Mitch Vance. I'm across the street at Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. This is the headquarters of the Marine Resources Program of ODFW. I'm with the Shellfish Program, and we do lots of different things. We help manage both the commercial and the recreational fisheries of all the shellfish, and that's crabs, clams, mussels, shrimp, abalone, everything. We also do what we can to monitor the habitat for all these critters in the estuaries. We do many different outreach events every year, try to spread that word around the state, and we work with many, many different partners. Oregon State Police helps us with the enforcement of our regulations. We work with the Oregon Department of Agriculture, talk about them a little bit. The Department of Environmental Quality helps with the with water quality of Oregon. The Department of State Lands owns the land of the estuaries, and they are involved in the leasing for oyster flats and so forth. Parks and Rec Department does a lot of monitoring and monitoring the beaches and so forth. River reports. Realized I didn't add all the other universities, other marine labs, Washington Fish and Wildlife, California Fish and Wildlife, and so forth. So we work with lots of different people to do what we can. And one of the things that we do is the crab resource. Lots of people want the crab, both commercially and recreationally, and it's a fun effort. How many people go crabbing? Okay. How many people want to but haven't yet? Yeah. It is fun. It's easy, especially on nice days like this. There are many, many different ways and places you can get engaged in this, and I'll go over some of those. I'm going to give you some information, but I do want to point out that on the ODFW website, there's lots of information. So that's the address up top, and these are some of the subheadings, but if you just Google shellfish ODFW, you'll find us. One of the things on there is this report that we just got published recently, and it is a good collection of 5 years of data that we put together, and that is counting the number of people involved in crabbing in the estuaries, both from boats and from the land, and then talking to them and figuring out how they did, how long they were doing it, and all that stuff. So there's lots of data in that report. I also do want to say, holler any time if there's a question. I want this to be just a discussion more than me just up here going through slides. So raise your hand or just yell out. So lots of people do pursue the crab in Oregon. Mostly the Dungeness crab over there on the left is the largest crab in Oregon. Very, very popular, very tasty. There's also the red rock crab that a lot of people also catch. It is not in every estuary. One of the things I'll talk about is the difference bay to bay between here in Uquid Bay. There's lots of red rock crab. There's the jetties with lots of rocks. There's lots of piers and pilings. You go 15 miles south down to Alcee Bay, you will not catch a red rock crab. That is a natural, open, sandy entrance. They just don't go in there. They're not far away. They don't go in there. And they're similar to the Pacific rock crab. Also likes that rocky habitat structure. Every once in a while, people will catch a kelp crab. Not too often. They do associate with the kelp beds. They just like hanging on to that kelp. That's why they rarely get down on the bottom and run around and go for the bait in the pots. We have lots of different smaller shore crab. And there are a couple of non-native crabs. The European green crab has set up shop in Oregon. It has not caused the devastation that many people were afraid of, but they are here. They do have naturally reproducing populations, but they only reproduce well in really warm years. So Oregon's a little bit too cold for them to really take over that much.
Where would they have been from, or are they likely to have been from?
They are the European green crab, so they came from the eastern Atlantic. Yeah. I don't know how they got here initially, but they showed up. So again, these are two of the main target species. You can tell them apart relatively well. There's some examples over there. The coloration is quite different. The carapace shape is also different. The red rock crab are quite elongated. The tips of the red rock crab are black. The tips of the claws of the Dungeness crab are white. You can tell them apart morphologically if you really get into it by counting the spines on the front of the carapace. That's one of the key characters.
The color change in the tips of the claws by age. When you're little bitty guys, they still white.
That's an awesome question. Both of the crab can exist in different colors. I've seen the red rock crab get really dark red, almost into the greens, and some people confuse them with the European green crab. And in the Dungeness, the white claws might not be as stark as in the adults. I wish I had a Google with me. Oh, we do. Well, look. There's a baby Dungeness crab in the back. What's that one look like? I think that's a molt of a Dungeness here. No, that's a red rock. Yeah, it's still with black tips, even though it's small. But we'll look. What do you find, Kate? Yep, still really light colored. But yeah, when they are young, when they are freshly molted, they're a lot greener than that more brick hue. So yeah, that's a good question because they do undergo a lot of different color forms. So once you know what crab is what, then you can figure out how many you can keep. These are the regulations. This is what I work with people on over and over and over. The fun thing about Oregon is everyone comes here and it's a new batch of people every weekend. So it's a chore. 10 years ago, we did get a shellfish license in place to help us manage the shellfish resources. And so once you turn 14 years old, you can have a shellfish license. Once you have that license, You can keep 24 red rock crab of either sex in any size. Some people think that those limits are so liberal that we want to get rid of them. That's not the case. They are native crab. They evolve right here with the Dungeness crab in the habitats that they go occur. The reason that the limits are so liberal is because they just are not pursued as much, and we've not had any big regulatory issues with them. We may or may not change that just because of that reason. The Dungeness crab, you can keep 12 males after they're 5 3/4 inches across the carapace. There are very few year regulations. In Oregon, the rule is you can have 3. And that's 3 of anything. There's some rings back there. Those are good if you're going to be tending your deer and pulling them and checking them often. There's also the traps, which the crab go in and then they cannot get out if they're too big. One of the other types of deer that's catching on is a snare, or there's different types of snare, but this is either the crab max or the crab hawk, I don't know what. But people are using this more and more where they cast them out with a little piece of bait right here with the fishing pole, and then the crab's going for it, and they pull it in, and it tangles them up and grabs them. And I've seen a lot of crabs hop with these, and it's fun. It's really interactive. You can pull it in really, really quick. It's a crab max or crab hawk. There's a couple different versions. One's rectangle like this. The other one is more diamond shaped, but they do the same thing. So in that identification part, the important thing is with the Dungeness crab, you only keep the males that are of legal size. And you can tell the males from the females by flipping them over and looking at their abdominal flap. That is this little structure right in the middle of their belly. The females are much more rounded, and that's functional because when she extrudes her eggs, she holds them, protects them for a while, and so that flap needs to be broader to hold on to those eggs. You can tell the males from the females in most pollen crabs. This is the red rock crab male. You can see again the narrow, really sharp triangular abdominal flap. The female with a much broader round one. The other regulation is the size. Again, with these people coming in from Iowa and Idaho and everywhere every weekend, they have a problem with this. And we try to tell them that yes, you measure the front of those spines, those points. And everyone says, no, my grandpa always measures point to point, but that's wrong. And our enforcement partners, state police, have heard it enough times, and they will give you a ticket. We can go over measuring in a little bit of that. Lots of stuff here we can play with. So there's how you do it. You take your gauge and you put it on this front part of the carapace and front of the spine and go over. It looks like this one's not going to quite reach that 5 3/4 inch mark. Close to the nose. So a little bit about the life history. Kate's going to talk much more about that in the future. Like many of the oceanic invertebrates, they do go through a life cycle. They mate. The female then extrudes her fertilized eggs. She holds them under that abdominal flap for a couple of 3 weeks, I believe, while those fertilized eggs mature. She then releases them as one of their first larval stages. They are free swimming in the ocean and fair game and everything eats them. That's why she can produce as many as 1 million eggs. So they go through these larval stages, through some in the ocean, through a couple of zodial stages, and the megalopy, which are much more dynamic swimmers. Then they metamorphose into a very, very small thing that looks like a crab, a cute little crab. And they grow up into adult and start the whole cycle over again. And from egg to reproductive adult is about 3 years, maybe a little bit less. And so after they settle down as their first juvenile stage, crabs and many other crustaceans only grow when they molt that old shell. So they do split across the back, and they back out of that whole shell with every part intact. Their old shell is hard, the new shell is really pliable, and as they're backing out, they pump that up with water, and that's when they grow. Over the next 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, that shell hardens, and then they undergo the filling out stage. They replace that water with muscle tissue. So you can see how they just grow and grow and grow, and I think we have some examples of all the different molts over there. So very often I get the phone call in the summer, it's like, oh my gosh, the beach is covered with dead crab. You guys have heard it too, right? And it might be the case, but more likely is that the ocean currents have brought a bunch of those shed shells up on the beach after a molting event, which for adult male Dungeness crab generally happens in May, June, July. The ocean currents deposit all these. You can tell when the molted shell is split along this outer suture line. I'll have a better example of that in a minute. But generally, this is a really good sign. This is a sign of a productive ocean when all these crab are growing and molting every year. There could be, what was my guess? Like 25 to 50 million adult crab molts in Oregon every year. And that's a good thing. So if they get deposited on the beach, that's a good thing. Yeah, there are.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, she asked, what happens when there is the whole crab body in that shell? And it's kind of hard to tell when the crab molts, it backs out, and that top and bottom half are still connected. And like I said, every hard part is in there, and it's really hard to tell if it's a molt or a dead crab. You'd have to pick it up, open it up, look at it, shake it, and if you see muscle tissue, then yes, in organs, it's a dead crab. Otherwise, it can be almost looking like a complete whole crab. But yeah, crabs do die, when they get really, really old, for certain unknown reasons. We did have a small die-off event last summer. Yeah, and the gulls were going crazy on us. Yeah. Anytime anything looks different, give me a call, and we can talk about it. It's hard to say whether it's something. I mean, the important thing is to know about it, document it, try to figure out what happened. Often, it is some combination of oceanic events that just caused a mortality event. And the other funny thing is when the ocean currents and wave patterns deposit some signal of some of them on the beach. We don't know where it happened, we don't know when it happened. and ends up on your beach. That's a tough one to call. But you can tell if they're up on the beach and if that carapace separates, if it is a small hole like this, that is a mortality, that died. If it splits way up here on this suture line, that's where you can tell it's a molt. And so that's a pretty easy way of seeing it go backwards. So you can see where these are split way up here by the outside, so you can walk up to that pile of crab and say, no, that's a molting event, everything's okay. If it was much shorter and that hole was just here, you could tell that was a mortality. Okay, to go crabbing, you can use lots of different types of gear. Most people use the pots and traps or the rings. These both have advantages and disadvantages. The pots are closed, so once the crabs go in, if they're large enough, they cannot get back out. You can leave them soaked for a long, long time, and then go back and check them. The rings are good in that the crabs can get there really, really quickly. To get into a pot, they have to smell the bait, find the pot, walk in the tunnel, and go through the triggers. You can bring a pot, but it takes a little bit longer for them to get in there. The ring, when this is lowered down on the floor of the bay, they just walk right up, and if you pull it quickly, you get crab really quickly. Here's an example of another type of snare. There's another one that's used when the crab walk up and get a throw at the pole. They are chewing on the bait, and these little snares, these little loops of line, and you pull it really quickly. If their leg is in one of those, it'll grab them and bring them in with that. People will walk out on the ocean beaches and wait for them. It's a little bit more common up north in the classic beaches. People walk out in the intertidal eelgrass beds, pick up crab and look for them like that. It is legal. Yeah. When they're there, it's pretty easy. And again, we have not too restrictive of gear regulations. So yeah, you can just pick them up. As long as it's male and big enough, you can keep it. And the really only gear regulation we have in Oregon is that you can have three. Virtually anything. I've seen homemade things, build a ring or a trap this big. Many people have approached us, asking us to put in better gear regulations. We haven't seen a statewide push that's large enough yet to go into that. Washington does have other gear regulations. We do try to promote many aspects of the gear types. We like it if they have destruct mechanisms, and that's when you have a pot like this. Somewhere on the pot, it's good if you have a piece of cotton twine where if your buoy gets cut off by a boat going by or something, that pot is lost. If there's a piece of cotton twine either on this lid strap or part of the mesh, that will disintegrate after a few months, and then crabs will be able to get in and out of that pot without being stuck there forever. Washington does have that regulation. We do not yet, except in this commercial fishing. So lots of different ways to get after them, and lots of different places to go after them. There's an aerial view of Equina Bay here. They're over here somewhere. There is the really good public fishing pier right over by the road parking lot. A lot of people go there. The boats, we have this in this yellow band is what we've identified on our website as the good, most popular crabbing areas. We can go a little bit higher up. Could go into the high flats a little bit, but people really target the sides of those main channels. There are many other public access spots along the bayfront you can throw rings and pots off of. And in the red here, again on our website, are the clamming areas. We're going to talk about clams in a little bit, but this map encompasses both crabbing and clamming. This is Silet's Bay. It's Lincoln City up here. And it has a much smaller area that's really good for crabbing. But people do walk off of Moe's here. It's a public area. Oh, I'm sorry. I want to cut different people off. I can be anywhere. So Lincoln City up here, people walk right down on the beach and throw a lot of these crab hops right off of the beach at the mouth of the bay there, and they do pretty well. Some boats launch and come down the river and work this channel a little bit, but it's not a really large bay. Again, clamming, we'll talk about later. Down south in Halsey Bay, a really popular and productive bay for Dungeness crab. And people work the mouth of the bay here, the whole channel. And you can go up here a ways, but it does turn into more river. And the crab don't like that low salinity water, so they won't go too much beyond somewhere here.
Kind of on that point.
Yeah.
When you talk about salinity, just it just looks like where you've got them mapped out, they're definitely, they don't go very deep, and it would be my guess.
Well, I mean, they're on the bottom of the bay, so they go as deep as they can be. And it's funny, in Halsey Bay, there's a hole right down here that's sometimes 50 feet deep, and they will really congregate there. But it is the case when the river starts flowing, like with the rain we had recently. Halsey Bay especially turns into a river, freshwater river, and that pushes them out into the ocean.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned it, but I missed it. Because I think you don't hear it. The Alcea Bay, because it's sandy, will attract the Dungeness with the other crabs.
Yeah, the red rock and the Pacific rock crab don't inhabit Halsey Bay.
The Dungeness do like the sandy bay.
Yeah, they really do. They bury in the sand. That's their preferred habitat. The red rock crab and Pacific rock crab really like that more rocky, structured area. Either pilings or rocks, and they like to hide in those crevices. And you will find them in Quinna Bay, Lower Bay, Coos Bay, many of those places. And yeah, on the jetties, the jetty rocks. The Pacific rock crab are much more associated with the ocean, so they don't come up the bay very far. The red rock crab will. Okay, so when you're going crabbing and or clamming, this pertains to both. You need to pay attention to the tidal cycles in the area you're at. There's tide tables here if anyone needs one. And being in Oregon here, this is a 24-hour period. We have 2 high tides and 2 low tides every 24 hours. The low tides are when you would want to go clamming. Generally, it's the high tides, the high slack tides is when people target for crabbing. The main reason for that is as this water comes in, fills up the bay, that incoming tide, you bring food, you bring the crab in, all that good stuff. And right around this time is when the currents are the calmest. And that's one opportunity for the crab to run around really, really easily and go after their food. If it happens to be chicken, then you will catch them. So what you want to do is look at your timetable. If you have the luxury of picking a day or a time of day when you go crabbing, you might want to pick a high slack tide that's not at 2 a.m. This is tomorrow. So I might shoot for 4 p.m. tomorrow, and I would put my gear in the water maybe a couple hours ahead of that, and go bracket this high slack tide and catch tomorrow afternoon. If I were going to go clamming, I would wait for a really low tide, and you can see this is next Thursday, a week from now, at 5 o'clock, 1700. It's a -1 foot tide, so that will be not too dark, but a really, really good low tide with lots of the tide flats exposed. The other thing you want to pay attention to is the exchange, the difference in the high tide and the low tide. When this is really drastic, that water is just pouring out of the bay, and that current is faster, and the crab are going to have a little bit harder time walking around. They might not be quite as actively feeding at this point in time as they are at this point in time when the current is not quite as strong. So those are all fun things to look at with the tides.
Mitch,
Yes, sir.
is it illegal to crab during the dark?
Yes, it is. It's legal to crab 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year in the bay. The only place that's closed is the ocean between October 15th and December 1st. That is when we're waiting for the next commercial season, basically, and just not have any crabbing activity out there. And then let the crab harden up. So, this is a graph off of our website. This is an example of some of the data that we've collected and share back to the public. This is the crab catch of many different estuaries that we monitor. Tillamook, we try to select Sequoia, Banyan, Coquille, Coos, Winchester Bay, the Umpqua, and Waldport, the Allison Bay. This is the crab catch per person, and you can see that it cycles. These are the months of the year, and it cycles through time. The gaps are when we don't have a sampler that are collecting data. But you can see in the Equina, we have people here all year. And the blue lines are from the boats, the brown bar graphs are people having from land. And you can see how that catch.
That's recreational. Recreational?
This is a recreational catch, yeah. We can talk commercial later or sooner, whenever you want. But this shows the cycle, and it generally, the recreational Dungeness crab fishery gets a lot better in the late summer and fall. And I've highlighted the red arrows are July of 2013 in all these different bays. And also the very left line of these graphs are July. So you can see last year, well, 2012, you can see in July that uptick of recreational crab success. Sadly, 2013 was not a good crab year in the estuaries. I don't know why. They just decided not to come in the bays. So we should have seen another spike right here in July. We did a little bit in Coos Bay, but some of these other bays just did not turn on like they normally do. We were able to document, I got all the phone calls, where are all the crab? The answer was, I don't know, I think in the ocean.
majority of the money.
And the commercial guys did do okay this year. So far, they've got 13 million pounds off of Oregon. Not a record year by any means, but not a horrible year either. Anyway, so this is just one example of the data that would be passed along through our website. This is another one that we haven't published, but a coworker of mine, Justin Ainsworth, put this together. And you look again at this average crabs per person by month, and you can see this horrible dip in the late winter, early spring, when the crab go back in the ocean. But then it really picks up in the summer and fall. And then we combine that by looking at the condition of those crabs. After they molt in the summer, they puff up with water. So in July and August, there's lots of crab that are big enough to keep, but they're mostly water. A lot of people just don't keep them then. You pull them up, you squeeze them, and they're soft. You can throw them back. Other people will keep them, and that's fine. But if you look at that hardness, this is the percentage that are hard shelled. So you can see when they're molting in May, June, and July, that just drops off. And so that is a decrease in the number of hard crab. If you combine the quality of the crab, if you call it that, and the number of crab you can get, and if you combine those, you can see that November, December, January, and February might be the best months to actually go crabbing. Keeping in mind that in January and February, you're not going to get as many, but they are going to be really high quality. So that's just a different way of looking at that data. We decided where I might want to go crabbing.
Okay, question.
Yeah.
Do they molt twice a year?
When they are adult Dungeness crabs, this big or bigger, it's generally just once a year. Both males and females. The females molt earlier in the spring, and the males wait till that early summertime. When they're juveniles, they will molt many times a year. During that first year, after they metamorphose into a juvenile crab, I think the general number is 7 times they'll molt that first year. Maybe the second year, maybe 2 or 3 molts, and then after that, just pretty much once a year. This is another example of some of the data that we collected and is in our report. When talking to all these people, we figure out how long they've been crabbing, how many they caught, how much gear they're using, all that good stuff. We also ask them where they're from. These are people crabbing in Uinta Bay, and they're pretty much from Central Oregon and the coast of Oregon. Although, they also are from everywhere. It's fun talking to all these people that come from all over the country. There's a few over here too, but other information in that report is we did actually develop an estimate of the total number of crabs that are recreationally caught in the bay. We look at all the Oregon estuaries that we monitor, which is most of them, not all. We don't get to the Halo and the Siuslaw and several others, so these are underestimates. But we do include all the Oregon estuaries, the Columbia River, and then recreational in the ocean. So there was 120,000 trips of people that went crabbing, and they caught just over 1 million pounds of Dungeness crab in 2011. That compared, that year was about 6 or 7% of the commercial fishery. So it is significant, the number of people targeting these crab and what they catch. Okay, that's crab. We move on to clams.
Just a quick,
First questions.
what's the outlook for crab? I mean, without, are they healthy in general, or concerns out there?
There are no strong concerns, no. They seem to be doing fine. The crab population and the commercial and recreational catch do go through cycles through the years. Again, this last fall was a lower recreational catch in the bays, but again, the commercial catch was not in the basement. The way it's managed commercially, where the bulk of the real crab are caught, is by size, sex, and season. And so the commercial guys can only catch males over 6 1/4 inches, which is a larger size than the recreational can be. And they can't keep the females, so they leave them in the ocean for reproduction. And there is that protected window after they're molting and hardening up where that commercial pressure is not on them. So while we do go through these cycles of population boosts and busts, there's no single concern about the crab population that I know about.
So there's 2 questions the public have asked me that we haven't really talked about. The first one was, where can you go crabbing if you don't have any gear? And you know that they can rent crab gear here in Newport, like at the South Beach Grocery is one of the places. Where are the other places that you can rent gear?
The marinas and tackle stores mostly have gear that they will rent out. You can buy it in many places, but yeah, it does take a certain amount of additional investment. Crab ring, like back in the quarter, you might be able to get one for as little as $25 or something.
If people want to do that, just setting them to the pier at the right tide is a really good advice. If they want to go out on the boat, a lot of you may not know that in Alsea, they rent boats and rings and bait that you can just go and rent there. So I would send them down to the Alsea.
Or here in Newport.
Well, I didn't know about Newport.
Yeah.
Where can you rent it in Newport?
Either the Embarcadero or right here at South Beach Marina. You can get boats and gear and bait also. And or Sawyer's Landing.
Sawyer's Landing, that's
Yeah.
right.
Well, I'm always biased towards Walpole. And then the second thing, the question that people ask me about that I know you can address is I've had people come in and said they caught crab, but it tasted bitter, and wanted to know why. You want to explain that?
I wish I could. I wish I would have been there to taste it.
I was thinking about
I think off-tasting crab is most often caused by improper handling, preparation, or cooking.
it's your fault. I mean,
It's
they're
not my fault. Globally, with crab, there is a condition called bitter crab syndrome that is caused by a parasitic dinoflagellate, but I don't believe we have that here in Northeast Pacific.
But how about the microsporidium?
So what?
The microsporidium.
There is another parasite, it's a microsporidium that causes a condition called a needle disease that does impact crab. It's not harmful to humans, and I don't know that that affects the flavor so much as the texture and quality of the meat itself. And also generally before, if a crab is infected with microsporidium, which we do have in the estuaries here, they generally die before they become legal size. So the possibility of getting a legal size microsporidium infected crab is low. It can happen. If you do get one, it won't hurt you. It may or may not taste bitter. I don't know. I've never eaten one.
That was what first brought it to the attention of researchers here. So back in the 90s, we did research on these crabs. You could look in the joints of the crabs, you turn the crab over, you look where the joints come together, and it's usually somewhat transparent, translucent. Well, this is, it's white. The Clostridium is so dense there that it actually changes the color of the flesh.
It makes it look like the muscle tissue is cooked already
Exactly.
while they're falling around. But you say those people said it was bitter tasting?
That was how they first brought it to our attention, you know, and Bob Olson and Rich were doing this research.
Huh. I don't want to do that business.
Well, but they were adult crabs too, and so it was probably a really high incidence just at that time, you know, of the disease.
One of the other things we do over at ODFW is we talk to the recreational crabbers and get all their information. We also go out, right now it's only every other month, and go crabbing in Alcee Bay and Quinta Bay. Every other month we put the same number of pots in the same places with the same bait to monitor the catch and so we can quantify any seasonal trends and differences year to year. We've been doing that for several years. We didn't put much of that information in the report, but some of it is on our website. And we do note the prevalence of this microsporidium infection. It can be relatively a high percentage in small crab in the upper estuary. But we haven't noticed any overall impacts to the population. Yes.
Was that a lot of people commented at the same time, that just wanted to
It was just like, I only recall two, you know, that actually commented on it. But it started a research project. How did the disease move around? They thought perhaps it had to do with cannibalism, the density of the crabs. There was a lot of things that they were looking into, and I don't recall what all the results are, but it's kind of a nice thing to mention because it's something that we did research on.
Server, are we studying the crab population and the amounts of this
No. We do our bi-monthly sampling, but and that shows us basically just catch per unit after how many crabs were in the pot at that point in that month. We do have another project over at Oregon Fish Wildlife, the Nearshore Marine Habitat Project. They do have an ROV, and they do map the habitat and are starting to get some data on the marine populations of fish and invertebrates. But there is not a single focus study on crab stock. You know, we do stock assessments on many other commercially fished species, but we haven't done that with crab yet. There is some video footage of crab presence or absence. It's quite amazing when they go down in the spring and see all the billions of baby crab. But it's really hard to quantify the crab population. A, because they move around a bunch, and B, when they're not moving around, they're buried in the sand and you can't see them. So it's a really hard one to get a handle on. Any other crab questions? What do you guys hear the most from visitors? What do they ask you about crab?
What restaurant did you go to?
What restaurant? Yeah. Chino's Ocean Blue, Local Ocean, Patronize, South Beach, you can get 5 crabs sometimes.
Where can I buy a license?
Where's that?
Where might I buy a license?
That's a good question. You can get licenses during business hours at our office right around the corner here. You can also get them at Fred Meyer's and Walmart, the bait stores, South Beach Marina Tackle Store. So yeah, many businesses, especially if they're associated with marine fishing stuff. And the shellfish license is for Oregon residents. If you're 14 or over, $7 for the whole year. It's all the crabs and clams for a year. If you catch it.
The other thing that the public doesn't usually know, may need to know, is that if they're out slurping roast shrimp for bait, they need to have a license.
Yep.
It's still a station.
don't have a lot of time for clams. How many people have done clamming? Yeah? How many people like to eat clams? Alright, good. Let's see how fast we can do this. Again, holler out when there's questions, because that's the most important thing today. What's the point? That's a big taco. A very similar life history. They are broadcast spawners, the male and or the female will spew their sperm and egg into the water column, go through larval forms, settle down as a juvenile, and then land generally bury in the sediment and start their adult life. The commonly harvested bay clams, going to focus sort of in the estuary for now. The 4 species of clams that we identify as bay clams are the gaper, the little neck, the butter clam, and the cockle. There are other types that are quite tasty. The soft shell and the purple varnish clam are both introduced species, but they are both here. They're in many different estuaries, in certain places at really high population levels. So the bay clams, you can have 20 per day. 12 of those can be gapers, so any mix of that number. Other clams are razor clams out on the ocean beaches. You can have 15. The bay clams, like I said, you can have 20. 12 of them can be gapers. The soft shell clams, or others, are 36, and we just increased the limit on the purple varnish clams to 72. Up in the city, right by the mouth of Schooner Creek, they are thick. You can get 72 really quickly, and if you rinse them out really good, get the sand out, they're quite tasty. There's other ones. The bent-nosed macoma is a small but tasty clam. Its big cousin is the white sand macoma. Mussels both in the bay and on the beaches, rock scallops, other stuff. The gaper clam, the fat gaper clam, is the largest clam, most commonly harvested in Oregon. Its cousin, the Pacific gaper, is much more elongated. You can find them more often up in Phillips Bay, Coos Bay, and many of these clams, they live down buried in the sediment, but they have to reach the water to get their food, their oxygen, and so they extend their siphon up through the sediment to the water surface, and that is a really good clam bed. One of the issues that we have with the management regulation of clams is identification. People often just go clamming and they get clams. But like other things like crab and anything else, you actually should know which one you get. It's sometimes hard to tell a juvenile gaper clam from a soft shell clam. You have 12 of these, you can have 36 of these. If you take 36 of these, because you're not sure, there can be a problem if the state trooper comes to talk to you. We can talk about identification of these. Shell shape is one thing. The gaper clam is called a gaper clam because it has a gape where its siphon sticks out, and that's one of the key characteristics of that clam. A little bit easier to see in the big ones, but it can be an issue. So again, they extend their siphon to the sediment surface to get the food there. And when they retract that, depending on the sediment, the type of clam, the type of sediment they live in, that's how you can tell what type of clam that is. The gaper clam will often have the tip of its siphon right there. You stick your finger in the hole, you can feel it. Other times you can see the shape of the shell. And sometimes tell the species. That could be a soft shell show, it could be a butter clam show. And that just takes experience. So you go out in the mud, you can see all these holes. These, I think, are butter clams. But only one way to really find out. Many different species will have different types of shows. Again, it takes experience. Ask the people out there on the mud flat what are you digging for? Show me what to look for. Generally, it'll be helpful.
How deep can you plan to, like, see the little layers?
Yeah, different clams, like a big caper clam. This is the sediment surface. He might be way down there. The cockles will live just barely below the surface. So it is species specific how deep they go. This is a really large soft shell clam. You can be down there also. It also does depend on the type of sediment they're in. If it's really compact stuff, gravelly, it won't go as deep. But the little necks or the cockles go very, very deeply. Oh, I'm out of time. Here, really easy pickings. Sometimes the cockles just lay on the surface. Call the Department of Agriculture Shellfish Hotline if you're concerned about the safety. There are marine biotoxins, which the razor clams and ocean mussels can accumulate and cause health problems. That number is all over our website also. Another project we have at ODFW is called Seeker. They monitor the number of clams that are actually there and the habitats they live in. They're quantifying all that. They've done Coos Bay, Detroit Bay, Tuna Bay, Tuna Bay. Continuing their hard work. All that information is on our website also. And that's some of the data they've shown. Alright, I have to stop here. This question. If you were really, really persistent, how many bivalves do you think you could catch in a day, legally? The maximum number allowed.
Like all the purple orange clams.
All the purple orange clams, all the mussels, the bay clams. A lot. I even included the purple rock scallop.
And that's per person, right?
Per person,
Your
per
spouse,
day.
They have a license too?
Yep.
I have one question. With a
239.
with a child, say if I have a license and I have a child with me, can that child actively dig and pick up clams on
Yes.
my license?
No. If the child is less than 14, they don't even need a shellfish license, but they do have to abide by the rules. So they can dig all the clams up to their limit.
They can take hundred to that also.
Yes. If they were really, really busy.
They have to carry.
Yeah.
So, two questions that we get asked often has to do with, if it's closed, where it's closed, and of course you get it found on the internet, but one nice thing that ODFW does is on their whiteboard in their office, in other words, you walk in the office, they post all the closings. So if it's linoleic acid or if it's PSP, they'll say exactly where it's closed, what part of the coast it's closed on. There was something else that people ask all the time. Does anybody ever ask about razor clamming? Because I've gotten questions about that too. And so on those, it's basically the real negative tides, and the way that I tell people to do is to look out and to see where everybody's digging and go to the place where everybody's bent over. That's usually like 4 or 5 ODFW guys. Because they know where to go. So yeah.
Gooey ducks. Excellent question. There are precious few gooey ducks in Oregon. They're very, very popular up in Puget Sound. There's a few down in California. They don't set up shop here. We tried planting them back in the day. There's a few, but most of what people get are the gaper clams. Since they're the largest foraging clam, they often call them gooey ducks, even when they're not. I had, I'm sure it was gooey duck. There it is. So it's this one. You can see how truncated, how flat that the top of the shell is, and they are the clam that has the hardest time getting its body in its shell. Even much more hard time than the gaper clam. The gaper clam can virtually close up and get its whole body in its shell. The gaper clam, I mean the blue duck, they're gonna hang out there. Yeah. Yeah.
I tried chasing these birds,
Yep.
and I can whip fast.
Well, it's not so much the speed, it's the depth that they're at. These gaper clams and blue ducks, they live way down deep there, and they can retract that siphon. So they've extended it to get to their water, and they just retract it. Their shell doesn't really move. Razor clams, slightly different story, but mostly they're just so deep, and they're retracting that siphon. It seems like they're digging, they're just really pulling that siphon back in. Okay, that's the next stop. You bet. Again, if you have questions.